Look, on 2 days ago, as we were trying to complete the electoral process, as our Constitution commands us to do, we witnessed an unprecedented disruption of that process by a group of thugs reacted to an unprecedented request from our president and most importantly, Commander-in-Chief. When I started the morning, I started out with my regular whip meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning. And the reason for that meeting was basically to get last minute questions answered by anybody who would have issues with what we may or may not be called upon to do during the joint session. At that meeting, one of the people I called upon early was Zoe Loughran. Zoe chairs our administration, House Administration Committee. And it's her job as one of the tellers and in that capacity to keep up with all of the forces on the Hill to make sure things were going according to expectations. She was assured by the leadership, the Sergeant-at-Arms and the Chief of the Capitol Hill Police, that everything was in place. I thought for sure that we would see at least the kind of precedent we saw during the Black Lives Matter administration when the building was protected from peaceful, and I want to emphasize that, peaceful demonstrators, people who came in peace, not bringing Molotov cocktails, backpacks, firearms, full with firearms, lead bombs. These people came to peacefully protest, and yet the Capitol building was rung with all kinds of shows of force. Now I wondered about that because as I drove onto the campus around 8:30, I saw nothing like that. I saw people very close to the building, no security on the steps. It was just like it's always been. So it's very clear that there was a total failure of leadership. And I want to emphasize that. It's almost as if they were getting their leadership teachings from the President of the United States. And that is just to avoid the issue and pretend it is not happening. And so I welcome the resignations of the Sergeant at Arms and the Chief of Police. And I think that there needs to be a top-down evaluation of that process. And we need to take a hard look at the people who are in that. It's because those people who know how those offices are situated, you will know that my office, the only place that you will see my name above the door is right off of Statuary Hall in the Lincoln Room. And the Statuary Hall was full of these thugs. Yet, nobody touched that door. They ended up on the 3rd floor where my staff was and where I usually am. And they were up and down the hallway trying to get into the inner room, and they had my office furniture up to the door to keep anybody from entering. So the question to me is, how did they know to go all the way up to the 3rd floor where there is no indication of my presence there and go into that hallway and never touch the door where my name is. There needs to be a thorough investigation into who was communicating with whom. And so that sends chills up and down my, I heard from my chief on yesterday, and he told me that many members of the staff are still rattled. I went by the office on yesterday before I left. Not my laptop, but my iPad is missing. Everything else seemed to be intact, but my iPad, not the frame that it goes into, but it had been removed for some reason. I've got the frame of it, I've got the keyboard, but the iPad is missing. So, and is missing from the part of the office that they were able to get into. And that door has been shattered for some reason. So I think there was something going on here that calls for an extensive investigation. And so I think that we just witnessed an attempted coup. And I'll close with this. If you go back and check, you will find that in 2018, I believe the date was like the 28th or 29th of January. I do know it was the evening before Trump's State of the Union address. I said at that time that this president does not plan to leave office. A lot of people gave me a lot of flack because I said that. I've been on some media people and saying that's gone a bit far. I was even asked by Don Lemon that night, are you comparing this president to Hitler? And I said, no, I'm comparing him to Mussolini. I meant that. He should have been compared to Mussolini. And when he came out of the hospital, after his battle with COVID-19, walked up the steps to the Truman balcony and looked out over the back of the White House. The next morning I heard it referred by at least two people in the media that he took a Mussolini stance. I caught a lot of flack for saying that 3 years earlier. All I'm saying here is we had plenty of signs that this president will resort to what he has resorted to. Just like there were plenty of signs that there was going to be trouble at the Capitol and security needed to be enhanced. They enhanced it for peaceful Black demonstrators. They had nothing to ward off unlawful thugs who happened to have been white. There's a racial connotation to this, and we all know it. We need to start calling it for what it is and stop hanging around and fooling around with this. This is an attempt by a racist president to do his part to start what would be tantamount to a race war in this country. This is bad stuff. And it's time for everybody to call it what it is. It is time for the Republican leadership to invoke the 25th Amendment. They need to do it. Pence needs to do it. But if he doesn't, we need to impeach. We need to impeach. This president says he wants to be remembered for doing things that's never been done before. He will be remembered. And he should be remembered from being the first president in the history of this country to impeach twice. 1 term, 2 impeachments. Now, I've been informed of another benefit to impeaching. We may not be able to have enough time for a Senate trial. But one of the attorneys who I depended upon and a member of Congress, the chair of a committee, I'll call his name, Bobby Scott, has informed me as of this morning that there's a benefit to impeachment that nobody's talking about. And that is, if a president is impeached, he informs me that that president is subject to removal within 24 hours or with 24 hours. So if we are afraid of this man having his finger on the nuclear button, then the House should do its part and impeach. And then it will be up to the McConnell and the Senate to do what's necessary, and they can remove him from office after 24 hours if he's impeached. And I don't know what the process will be, but I'm told that he will be subject to removal 24 hours later. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Congressman. Just a quick reminder, if you do have questions, please indicate so in the chat or use the raise your hand feature. Then when you are called on, please make sure to announce your name and your outlet. Joseph Bustos, I see your hand is raised, so you may unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you for doing this today. I have a couple questions. First, can you give us a little TikTok of your whereabouts on Wednesday as they started evacuating people from the chamber? Were you taken to a secure location? Did your detail move you quickly?
Yes, it did. I was on the floor, as you know. The process started with a joint session at 1 p.m. I got to the floor as I was told to do at 12:50. They showed me where my seat would be, which was literally just behind where I usually sit for joint sessions. But as you know, we were being sort of socially distanced, and so I was not allowed to sit in my regular seat. I was moved to a seat that would allow me to be socially distanced away from Steny Hoyer, who I used to sit next to. And there was only 11 of us on our side. Immediately I knew there was going to be some trouble, because when the Republicans came to the floor, they downright refused to adhere to the instructions. And this is the kind of stuff that sends signals out to these people. They did not socially distance. One or two of them did not wear a mask. And the speaker made an attempt to ask them to leave the floor. They refused to do so. This country should run on law and order. And the speaker was trying to keep order. They disrupted the order. Now, this is the speaker before we started the joint session, when the Senate all came onto the floor. Go back and take a look at the tape. You will see that they were refusing to do what we were asked to do. That's the kind of stuff that gives credence. These people look at their elected officials. They ain't paying any attention to the speaker. They aren't doing what the attending physician asked them to do, so we don't have to do it. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. I knew right then that we were in for a disruptive day. And Pence came on. He started the open session. He started down through the road. We were discussing Arizona. And all of a sudden I saw the speaker leaving the podium. And I knew that something was wrong with that, because we had asked her to consider not presiding at all, but she said she was going to carry out her duties and responsibilities, and she was going to preside no matter how long it took. So when I saw them moving her, and all of a sudden Jim McGovern going to the seat to take her seat, I looked to see where she was going. And I looked right into the face of the young lady who happens to be a native of South Carolina and who is one of the supervisors of my security team. She looked at me and beckoned for me to come to her. And I went over and I saw the look on her face, and I touched Steny Hoyer on his shoulder. I said, Steny, something's up. We need to get out of here. And I walked over to her. They took me down some places that I did not know exist in the Capitol, and out in an area that I was familiar with, and out to a waiting automobile, well, I call it my truck, and they whisked me away to an undisclosed location. Now, when I got in the truck, she asked me, she said, the building has been breached. Do you want to go home or do you want to go to the undisclosed location? I said, take me home. And we started out, after about 2 blocks, she turned to me and says, we can't take you home. We got to take you to this undisclosed location. And so they took me to that location. And I got there and my truck pulled up at the same time Nancy Pelosi's truck pulled up. A little bit later, Senator Hoyer showed up. Then they moved the Democratic leadership into one area of this location and the Republican leadership in the other. But let me hasten to add, there were interactions between both leaders. And I gotta say this, some of my friends will get upset with me, but Mitch McConnell was great. And we worked together, not just to make that visit a good visit, but to put in place getting back to the Capitol and getting back to the business at hand to ensure a peaceful transfer. We were there for 4 or 5 hours. And after some back and forth, we then went back to the Capitol. But not before I detected, and I spoke to the speaker about this, there was something different between what I would call the regular security people, Capitol Police. They were informing us of something totally different. When we were getting on the phone, with the leadership, that's when I knew that the leadership had to go. And I told Nancy Pelosi that I thought that we needed new leadership because they seemed to be telling us what they thought we wanted to hear. When the rank and file Capitol Police was telling us what we needed to do to stay secure. The rank and file had it right. The leadership had it wrong.
And 5 of your Republican colleagues from South Carolina voted to uphold the objections. Do they hold any responsibility of what happened on Wednesday?
I'm gonna let them talk about their own stuff. I just know this, and I'm gonna say it again. Republicans ought to be ashamed of themselves. This country is more important than any one person. I often tell people in sort of a joking way, I've been very fortunate to have 3 daughters and not having a son. Because if I had ever had a son, my son would have been named J. Everett Dirksen. That's a deal I had with my late wife, that if we had a son, the son would be James Everett after Dirksen. And because I had that much respect for him as a Republican senator, doing what was necessary to keep this country together. He was one of the people who did what was necessary to give us the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. When Republicans tried to stop it, he did what was necessary to work with Lyndon Johnson to get us there. So this, with me, is not any kind of partisanship here. I admired and respected him. Republicans did what was necessary when they sat down, told Richard Nixon, Goldwater, told Richard Nixon, it's time for you to leave town. This country is bigger than you. This democracy is greater than anything that you're proposing. That's what's at stake here. Preserving this democracy, keeping this country on route to its pursuit of perfection. So nothing about this is partisan with me. Goldwater, I had so much respect for the role he played in the Nixon thing. I even read his book, The Conscience of a Conservative. So this ain't policy with me. This is about this country. This country has not always been good to me. Was not good to my parents and grandparents. But this country has a democracy in place that's worth preserving until we get it all right. And my Republican colleagues ought to be ashamed of themselves for voting to overturn the will of the people, telling me about 74 million voters. What about the 82 million voters that voted for the current president-elect? This is shameful stuff, shameful. And I'll tell them that to their teeth.
Thank you, Congressman.
All right, our next question comes from Sean Cabbagestock. Sean, you may unmute and ask your question.
I can see Sean, but I can't hear.
Oh, okay, and I can't see myself.
But I can see you, and I can hear you.
Good deal. Okay, Congressman, first off, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity today. I want to talk a little bit about the inauguration. So we've learned from the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies that no public tickets will be available. So how are you guys planning to handle the inevitable crowds that will show up, and how will protesters be handled?
Well, we've been saying for some time now, and I'm going to say it again, and I don't know why my friends, now I got some close personal friends, as recent as last night, asking me for tickets to inauguration. There ain't gonna be any public tickets to the inauguration. We've been saying that. We are going to run this inauguration much like we ran our national convention. It's gonna be virtual. We're gonna do what is necessary to preserve as much tradition as we necessarily can. But we had already decided after COVID-19, that there will be no more than maybe 2,000 people allowed in that area where the president and the vice president will be taking their oaths of office. We have been saying that. Now, after this, it may be even less people. So please, I want all my friends here in South Carolina who are so enamored with this new president, let's stay home. It's going to be on television. Stay in your pajamas, get a cup of coffee, sit around and enjoy this peaceful transfer of power. There's no need to come to Washington, because chances are you won't get any closer to whatever it is that will take place than 3 or 4 blocks. So I don't know why you want to come to Washington. You're going to get a much better view sitting in your living room than standing on the street corner 4 or 5 blocks away. If the weather is like it is today, you're going to be miserable.
You said on NBC News recently last month that President Trump being present at the inauguration was an important step to a peaceful transition of power. Following that incident that happened in Washington, do you still feel that way?
Yes, I do. I think he ought to put himself above that. He's already made statements on 2 occasions now. He asked them to go home the other day after being forced to do so. I read this morning or late last night that he made another statement saying that after the actions by the joint session certifying this, he's prepared to leave the White House. I hope he'll stop by the inauguration and do what presidents do: demonstrate leadership, put country first. He says his whole philosophy since he's in office: America first. This is his last chance to put America first.
And finally, so how does Wednesday factors into security protocols for January 20th?
Big time, big time. I have said earlier today, and I want to say again here, I'm calling upon the powers that be, not just in the District of Columbia, but Maryland and Virginia. I would hope those governors will start putting in place right now what it takes to activate the National Guard. Don't wait until the 20th or even the 19th. Put them on notice now so they can get things straight with their families, their business straight, and say to them, you're going to be on active duty starting January 18th and be in Washington in place to make sure that thugs, I'm going to say that again, thugs don't overrun the Capitol again. And to make sure that the new leadership that we're going to put in place with the security, the Capitol Police and the Sergeant at Arms officers, that you will work with them to make sure we have a peaceful transfer of power.
And one more question. So you talked about impeachment earlier. So what are the pros and cons of impeachment 2 weeks before he leaves office?
About the what now?
The impeachment, what are the pros and cons of impeachment with Trump only having about 2 weeks left in office?
Well, as I just indicated, and this was a part of impeachment that I had not focused on, I'll call Bobby Scott after this because I just heard from him just before I sat down here to interact with you all about this little part of impeachment that nobody's talking about. The value of impeachment. Right now, I think, is to give Trump on his resume that which he's deserving of, so he can have a little asterisk in history. He's always wanting to do stuff that's never been done before. There's never been a president impeached twice before. So let's impeach him. Give him what he wants. Now, Bobby Scott tells me that to impeach him will make him eligible for immediate removal from office 24 hours later. And what that process is, I don't know. But most of us just thought that once the impeachment was over, it then had to go over to the Senate for a trial. And there was not enough time to get that process done. But I'm now hearing that can be short-circuited with a vote of the Senate. So we'll see. And so I'm not professing now to know everything about this. In fact, I might not know anything about this. All I know is what Bobby Scott has told me, that this is a part of impeachment that nobody is thinking about. And that may be why we ought to impeach sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Sean. And just one note for everybody, going forward, I would ask that reporters stick to only one question at this time so we can make sure we get to everyone. And then if we have time at the end, we can circle back and do follow-up questions. Our next question comes from Jamie Lovegrove. Jamie, you can unmute and ask your question.
Thanks, Congressman. There were two tweets that were sent out during this call that I want to ask you about from two different people. One, you had just said a few moments ago that you hope President Trump would attend the inauguration. So you probably didn't see during this call that he actually tweeted that he will not be attending the inauguration. So I wanted to get your reaction to that.
I've just seen it.
You just seen it. And then another one is from Senator Graham, who is, of course, one of the Senate Republicans who would be considering impeachment if the House were to vote on it. And he said that he thinks that it would do more harm than good, that it won't be successful in the Senate, and that it would, that would not help heal the nation. And so I'm curious for your reaction to that as well.
Well, that depends upon whether or not you're dealing with sanity. I would say to my colleague from South Carolina, which is most important, preserving peace in this country, removing from office a person who cannot be trusted with the levels or levers of power. That's what I'm concerned about. This guy, if you look at the speeches he's made, in the last couple of weeks, what he said that led to this insurrection, it's no telling what he would say or what he would do to imperil this country. And I know for a fact that military leaders are having discussions as we speak about how to respond to what may be some foolishness by this president. And so I'm trying to help protect the country. And once again, he sounds like he's trying to help protect a president.
And then just your reaction to President Trump's announcement that he won't attend the inauguration?
Well, that's his prerogative. There is no constitutional requirement. That's a tradition. And so he can do what he wants to do, but this country it can very well do without him. So his presence, to me, will allow him to put the country first in his last act. But he's been never known to do the right thing.
Thank you, Jamie. Our next question comes from Brittany Breeding. Brittany, if you're on the call, can you unmute and ask your question?
Hi, yes. So basically, I was just wondering, what emotions were you feeling when you first found out what was going on and that protesters were inside the Capitol?
Well, you know, I never felt fear at all. You know, I told, I was having a meeting one time, Bob Portman, who was a Republican senator from Ohio. Bob Portman and I have worked together on stuff, trying to do a budget and that sort of thing. We first worked together on an ethics issue. And we've become pretty good buddies. I told Portman one time, he was talking about how hard it was for us to do what we needed to do to put a budget in place. I told him, I said, this ain't hard. Let me tell you what's hard. What is hard is sitting in the jail in the county that I'm currently sitting in, Orangeburg, having been arrested for trying to get rights that the Constitution gave me, and not knowing when you're going to get out of jail or if you will get out of jail safely. That was hard. The hardest day of my life was March 15, 1960. So yesterday or the day before, there were anxious moments, but I never felt fear.
All right, our next question comes from Lana Harris. Lana, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi there. So question is, as many people as there were who may have had malicious intent going to that rally and subsequent storming of the Capitol, there were some people who went to that rally simply because they are Americans who support the president or his values and ended up being caught in the thrust of everything. I mean, obviously, I don't know if most unsuspecting people could have guessed what would happen. So do you have a message to those Americans who just found themselves in the middle of a riot, but did have good intentions, just went to go support the president or his values?
Well, I'll simply say this. You can support this president without being a part of any effort to ignore the will of the American people. Anybody showing up in Washington at his invitation on January 6th, long time after all the votes were counted, long time after more than 50 court cases were determined that there is nothing untoward about this election, I'm not too sure that you were being honest when you say the only reason you were there was to show your support for this president. Support for what? Can't be for his election. He'd already lost the election. You wanted to show your support for insurrection, which is what he was trying to start? Come on now. That doesn't pass the smell test.
Thank you.
All right, our next question is from Joanne Merrigan. Joanne, you can unmute and ask your question.
Can you hear me, Mr. Clyburn?
I hear you now.
Okay, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good. Talk to me a little bit more about the Republicans, especially those in the House. I talked to Buddy Carter yesterday, who was one of those who voted to cancel the votes in Arizona and Pennsylvania. His explanation was that he had a problem with the process. I think you've already indicated that they have perpetuated the lie and made things worse. What's your message to Carter in your neighboring state about his vote?
Well, he's offering an excuse. That's not a reason. Because there's nothing different about this process than that that was in place 4 years ago. And what was so funny about that? The vote was exactly what it was 4 years ago, only a reverse. And 4 years ago, the person he supports said it was a landslide. So I want him to tell me what was different about the process 4 years ago that he supported when it went his way. And the process 4 days ago, or let's say 24 hours ago, that he is now against. He had a problem with the process. What was different about the process? Absolutely nothing.
Thank you.
All right, our next question comes from Brody Hart. Brody, you can unmute and ask your question. Here's Brody is no longer on the call.
Hey,
There he is.
I apologize. I'm here. Representative Clyburn, I just want to get your response to so many South Carolina representatives objecting to the certification of electoral votes.
Those people were simply putting a president, and a poor excuse for a president, I might add, before the country. That's all it was. It's just nothing else about this makes sense. The only sense that you can make of this is they were putting a president ahead of the country. And it's so shameful. A country that has been so favorable to them all of their lives, favorable to their parents and their grandparents. And they decided to turn their back on this country. And here we are, 59 members of the Congressional Black Caucus, most of whom have seen their parents and grandparents treated less than human by this country, but they still think this country is the world's best hope, and they want to preserve it. There's something very ironic about that.
All right, our next question is from Kirk Brown. Kirk, you can unmute and ask your question.
Good morning. Representative Clyburn has answered the question that I had. I wanted to ask him about the events as they unfolded during the day, but I appreciate you calling on me, and I appreciate the congressman taking time to speak to us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we do have time if anyone has additional questions or follow-up questions. Lana Harris, I still see your hand is raised. Do you have follow-up questions for the congressman?
Very sorry. No, I did not put it down.
Oh,
Thanks.
no problem. Jamie Lovegrove, you may ask your question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a follow-up to what you were discussing in terms of the developments that day on Wednesday. So you were taken away. Were you in touch with your staff at that point? And could you go into any more detail about what they dealt with over the next hour or two as these protesters were going through the halls?
Yes, I was in touch with staff. I had to apologize to my daughters later because they could not reach me, and I did not reach out to them in a timely fashion, but they did get in touch with my security detail, and I kept up with them through the detail. But when I did talk to my chief, he's the one that made me aware that they had pushed all the furniture of my inner office to the door, and that they were out in the hallways of the door and trying to get in, but they kept them out by having all the furniture stacked at the door. I didn't get into a lot of detail with them. Just wanted to make sure that they were all right, and they told me that they were. And I assured them that I was okay, and to inform my family members that everything was okay. But I did not want to run the risk of continuing to call them because, I had no way of knowing exactly who might be listening into the calls and stuff. So I didn't tell my family a whole lot about what was going on.
Was there any moment where you have a detail and you were taken away with other members of leadership and you were taken to this undisclosed location? You can see on the feed that while you're taken away, obviously most of the rank and file members of the House are left in the chamber, while all of this is going on. Were you at any point genuinely concerned about either your own safety or those of the rest of your colleagues?
I'm always concerned about the safety of the rest of my colleagues, and I was in that instance. I did communicate with the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, Bennett Thompson, who was in the chamber, and I asked him why he didn't leave. He told me they were asked to stay inside the chamber, and they were locked in. And I suspect that meant that intruders were locked out. So he told me, because he was up in the balcony where visitors usually sit, because of Nancy Pelosi making sure that we socially distance. She had members, there were only 11 of us on the floor, but there were other members up in the balcony doing what the attending physician asked us to do. And Bennett Thompson was one of those members. And he said it was an hour after we left the chamber when he was allowed to leave. But he never told me that he ever felt in danger. But when he left, he started telling me about his experience as they led him out of the building. And it turned out that that area and that route that he took was the same route that I had taken earlier. Because I was telling him later in the evening about being in a part of the Capitol I never knew existed. He said, I was in a part of the Capitol I didn't know existed either. And when he started telling me about his experience, it was the same experience I had. So I'm going to say once again, the Capitol Police did their jobs. They were great. They got us out of there. They got us to where we needed to be. They did their jobs. It's a shame they didn't have better leadership.
Thanks, Jamie. Our next question is from Heather Gale. Heather, you can unmute and ask your question.
Heather's actually the boss. This is Nick Papantonis, who I work for her. Congressman, I had a question looking forward to you. I should probably show my face so you can see me. I had a question looking ahead, the democracy has been tested this week in the last few months in a number of different ways, which leads to the question of, are there any reforms or laws that in your mind will need to be examined and possibly passed, even some rising to the level of constitutional amendments that we could be seeing in the next few years?
You know, that's an interesting question. I do think that we need to do as we did after 9/11. After 9/11, we put together a commission to take a hard look at things that might need to be done or undone. And they came forth with some stuff that was really, really good. I think that this is something that we need to take a hard look at. What was it, 1952, 53? When we had an invasion of the House. In fact, there's still bullet holes in the chamber. I believe it was a disagreement that I believe it was some insurgents, some activists. It might have been from Puerto Rico. I forgot now exactly what it was back in 1952 or 53. And things were put in place as a result of that. But you know how things happen. As time goes on, things tend to wane, and sometimes you get comfortable with the process and you let your guard down. And I think that's probably what happened with this on the day before yesterday. I think we've gotten a little too comfortable. All you got to do is look at the videos. There were people who were let in the door. Unless those videos are doctored, I saw people opening the doors for people. I saw people outside moving the barriers and waving for these people to come onto the grounds. I saw videos or pictures of security, Capitol Police taking selfies with some of these people. What is that all about? That's getting too comfortable. That's getting too comfortable. I don't know how that could even be allowed. How could they allow themselves to get put in? That is getting too comfortable.
And just a quick follow-up, sorry, on a broader scale, has there been any discussions of any reforms just based on the last few months in general?
Oh yes, we've been having discussions on reforms, not just about what may or may not have happened 2 days ago, but especially about how this president has been conducting himself. Absolutely, there needs to be reform. If you remember, you probably don't remember when, but from your studies, that the transition used to take place way down in March. And because of some issues, they moved it back to January. This may still be too long. We have in many other countries, you have an election one day and power change within 24 hours. It may be it's time for us to take a look at whether or not we got too much time going between the election day and the change of power. There's no reason for us to have this done immediately after recounts are over. And maybe we need to take a look at that as well. It's just like when the new session begins. Right now, the new Congress must be sworn in on January 3rd. And this year that meant we all had to get back to Washington in order to be sworn in on Sunday. We could, by legislative action, postpone that for a couple of days, but everybody was afraid of doing that for fear of what this president may or may not do in those couple of days when we were waiting to install a new Congress. We got to look at all these things. We live in a new world now. This world is different. So many things that we do were pre-internet and social media. We've got to look at the fact that we now live in a soundbite world where a lot of people believe everything they see and hear. I remember when I was growing up, you'd ask people, man, where did you get that from? Well, it was in the paper. Well, you know, I used to be in that newspaper business too. And so I know how headlines are written, and they're always written about what's in the story. It's about what will attract attention. And these kind of headlines that go out on social media, a lot of it is to attract attention, not to inform. And so a lot of people are getting their information from stuff that's there to attract attention, but not to inform. So we got to look at all of that now. This is a new world, and we got to really get serious about upgrading a lot of our procedure and probably modifying a lot of our laws and putting in place some new laws.
All right, our next question is from Adam Mincer. Adam, you may unmute and ask your question.
Hey, Congressman, glad to hear that you're safe. Questions on the inauguration. First is Vice President Pence has said that he would be willing to attend if he was invited. Is an invitation being extended to the Vice President? And what measures, safety measures, have been added since Wednesday?
Well, as you know, I am chair of what is basically an honorary committee. There are 5 of us on this committee, and we do have a CEO who I assume is staying on top of all of this. I think we have a Zoom meeting or some other kind of meeting on Monday to get into details. Remember, we just here within the last couple of hours that the president says he's not going to attend, and you're now telling me that the vice president says he will if invited. We got to look at all of that and see exactly how to do that. I don't know whether or not any invitation has been extended from the staff. It certainly hasn't come to the attention of the committee yet. But once again, everything is in flux. I thought I knew exactly what it was going to be 2 days ago. As a result of 2 days ago, I don't know exactly what it's going to be. So a lot of changes are going to be made over the weekend. And I think that by this time on Monday, some new stuff may be in place.
Thank you, Adam. At this time, Congressman, it does not appear that we have any more questions. So if you have any closing remarks, we can wrap up the call.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Let me close with this. You know, some of you have heard me make reference to Alexis de Tocqueville. I'm one of the people I'm enamored with in history. And the reason I am so much is de Tocqueville came to this country back in the 1830s to study our penal system. And while here, de Tocqueville said he discovered a certain magic about the United States of America. And he set out to try to find the source of that magic. And after going in and studying our institutions and going to our governmental bodies all around, he came to the conclusion in his 2-volume work that America's greatness is not because it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because it has always been able to repair its faults. COVID-19 has revealed some faults in our system. This incident 2 days ago has revealed some faults in our system. I am hopeful that we can maintain America's greatness by doing what is necessary to repair those faults. They have been revealed to us. Are we going to repair those faults, or are we going to continue to kowtow to a demented human being who got elected president of this country, who never should have been elected president? And he did so violating something else that has been attributed to de Tocqueville as well. Though I'm not sure, I haven't, and I've had people research this and tell me they can't find that de Tocqueville ever said this. But if you go online today, you will see that he is accredited, de Tocqueville is accredited with having said that America is great because its people are good. And if the people of America ever cease to be good, America will cease to be great. We have a president about to take office in a couple of days who said that this campaign last November was about restoring the soul of America. I believe that this inauguration on January 20th will be about restoring America's goodness. Because I think that if we don't restore the goodness, we are going to lose our greatness. Thank you guys so much for joining me.